Our Heavenly Father, we thank you again for another Sabbath day. We thank you for an opportunity to come together as a family. And Father, just to learn the nuggets you have in your scriptures today, and to help us to find, the truth, and help us, Father, to to be, Father, let us seek, your Spirit, and to lead and guide us, and help us prepare for what's coming, for the future, and to help us to be good lights, and to help people, to lead them along the way. And Father, keep us humble, and keep us always true to you. We ask these things in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah. We recording? Both audio and video. All right. Okay, we're gonna be covering Matthew 19. It's a difficult chapter, difficult subject, because it's the subject on divorce and remarriage. And so before we get into that, though, we're going to do a recap from last week. Last week we reviewed the issue where the disciples appear to be having a dispute on who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And so they inquired with Yeshua, and of course Yeshua, his answer is profound. He goes right to the heart of the issue, and he says that whosoever shall humble himself as a little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom. And so he was dealing with the heart issue of the disciples. They had a pride issue. They wanted to know, what their position was going to be, and we can see a lot of that in today's society, especially in politics. And position is become so important. And Yeshua had went on to say that the Gentiles, that was their mindset. They were all about position and being up here and others being below. And Yeshua said, no, that's not the way it works in the kingdom. And so we looked at Proverbs 13:10. Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom. And we also asked the question, where else do we see this theme, this same issue, where the disciples were having a dispute on position, who's going to be the greatest? And it was during the Passover meal. And we know that the Passover meal was the event that began the Exodus. The very first Passover was the event that began the Exodus out of Egypt. Yeshua emphasized reconciliation in chapter 18, emphasizing the heart to seek the one lost sheep over the 99 that did not go astray. And Yeshua deals with the root issue that hinders our ability to foster reconciliation and forgiveness. And the actions of the Torah we discuss it's what's important. There's a lot of guidelines and instructions in the Torah, but the goal is to produce actions that foster good relationships, that foster a community, that help people to understand the heart of God and to help them along the way. So when the day comes, Yeshua returns, the resurrection happens, that his house is full, the house that he's prepared with many, many mansions. So we have to help people along that path. And so how we treat, how we respect people is important. Forgiving people is important. When a brother sins against you, you're supposed to leave your gift at the altar and go reconcile first, and then return to offer your gift. We're reminded in 1 John chapter 4 concerning testing the spirits to know if they're from God. This is, how can you love God whom you can't see if you can't love your brother whom you can't see? So God uses the physical things that he created in this earth to help us in our spiritual walk. Our physical experiences in life is our spiritual test on earth in the eyes of God. How can we respond primarily in relationships, or how we respond primarily in relationships exhibits the real nature of the inward man. Isaiah 57:15 says, "For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity, whose name is holy." He says, "I dwell in the high and holy place," the temple, "with him also that is of a contrite, humble spirit. To revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite one. So when we pray for the Spirit, when we pray for His filling, His guiding, the one thing that hinders that connection, that relationship, that filling, is the state of our heart, being humble or proud. We talked about paying taxes to an unrighteous government. We looked at the example of Judas of Galilee. If you remember Gamaliel, he was an expert in the Torah. He used Judas of Galilee as an example of how to deal with obeying God and man. He said that if the work is of God, you cannot destroy it. But if the work is not of God, it will come to naught. And so this example of Judas of Galilee, he was one, if you look up his history, you'll find that he was one who raised up an insurrection against the Romans because he believed that paying taxes to an unrighteous government was wrong and unconceivable, and he was willing to fight against it. Well, Gamaliel reminded them that this Judas of Galilee was destroyed along with all his followers, concluding that resisting paying taxes to an unrighteous government was not the work of God. So just an example in the Bible where they used this individual who had a he had a ministry, and one of his tenets of his ministry was, we're not paying taxes to an unrighteous government, and that's what we're going to stand on. That's what we're going to fight for. And what happened? He was destroyed. So sometimes, our passions are not God's passions, and we have to check that against Scripture. Okay. All right. So now we're going to get into the next session from Ryan.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Gospel Cycle on Transforming the Kingdom. We are in Matthew 19 right now, and we are in the section discussing divorce. And this is one of these areas that I found really interesting. It's just really theologically loaded what's going on here. So let's jump right in here. So Yeshua, he's departed Galilee, and he's come to Judea. And so now he's being confronted by some Pharisees, and they ask him a very interesting question. Let's look at specifically what's said here. Look at the wording here. They say, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife, or to put away his wife, for any reason? Right, and this "at all" is kind of added in here. You can see this at the bottom. The word reason, or the phrase reason at all, is one single Greek word. For any reason. Now, why is that important? Why do I point that out? Because there was an argument going on. This is one of those cases where it's extremely helpful to consult Jewish literature. And here we need to consult the Mishnah, because this was a practice that was going on and an argument that was going on between the two houses of Pharisees. You had the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. The house of Hillel were a group of Pharisees who were very liberal. They apply the laws a lot more liberally, whereas the house of Shammai were very strict, very conservative on their keeping, and they had a debate about Deuteronomy 24. Okay, so let's start by going back to Deuteronomy 24 and reading what Deuteronomy 24 says. Okay, so it says, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes, because he found this word says some indecency in here, in her, and the Hebrew word there is ervat davar, which is davar is basically, it could mean word, right? But here within the context, it means a matter or a thing. He found something of indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts her hand and sends her out of the house, and she leaves his house, and so on and so forth. And you can read that. If you want the full context of what that passage is talking about, you can see my teaching. It's part of this kind of big series called Your Wife by Covenant. I think it's like part 2 or 3. You'll see it. We talk about this. But to kind of summarize, Deuteronomy 24 was actually really a legal law that was preventing someone from divorcing his wife and keeping the dowry, and then she goes and marries someone else, and then he either dies or they just have a no-fault divorce, and so she keeps the dowry from that second marriage. Now the first husband can't go and marry her, and basically he'd have the original dowry plus that dowry from the second marriage. Otherwise, the land would be defiled. Again, if you want that full explanation, please see that also in the Torah portions concerning, and probably that goes through Scripture, concerning Deuteronomy 24. You'll all have that discussion in there as well if you really want to get in depth on what that means. But I'm going to focus in on here on this first century context of what's going on. So this was the thing. They found a matter of indecency in her. And so the thing is that the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, they read the same verse, but they interpreted it differently. That's kind of the thing when you study Scripture. You can actually both read something and come away with different interpretations, different understandings. And so they have this debate, and this debate is recorded in the Mishnah Gittin, Gittin 9 verse or 9.10. Okay, and so they were basically, what they were doing was they were arguing over, because you can read the whole thing, but I'm just going to kind of summarize the argument. They were arguing over whether or not it was a matter of indecency, which is what Shammai ruled as, and said, this means, a matter of indecency, i.e., she commits, adultery or some sort of sexually lewd act, and that stands as grounds for divorce. Rabbi Hillel said, no, it means a matter or in indecency. Okay, so here's where this debate is recorded. This is Mishnah Gittin 9.10. And it reads this: the house of Shammai says a man should divorce his wife only because he's found grounds for it in unchastity. Because it says, or since it says, because he has found in her indecency in anything, Deuteronomy 24. The house of Hillel says, even if she spoiled his dish, since it said, because he has found in her indecency, found in her indecency in anything, right? And Rabbi Akiba says, even if he has found someone prettier than she, since it says, and it shall be that if she finds no favor in his eyes, right? So they were interpreting it. So if she spoiled his dish, or if he even saw someone prettier than her, she had to look her prettiest around him. So if he sees someone prettier, he can divorce her, according to Rabbi Akiba. And House of Hillel says, even if he spoils the dish. Wow! So you could just get rid of your wife. You got to think about this. This is a women's right issue, right? This is like, you're treating your wife like garbage. You're basically treating them as subhuman. If they ever burn your meal, you can just toss them aside. That's a huge issue there. Now, if that wasn't enough, it's also recorded in Mishnah Ketubot 7.6. So let's read this one. And those women go forth without payment of marriage contract at all. She who transgresses the law of Moses and the Jewish law. What is the law of Moses that she transgressed? If she fed him food which has not been tithed, had sexual relationship while she was menstruating, if she did not cut off her dough offering, or if she vows and does not carry out her vow. And what is Jewish law? Now, you notice how they have the law of Moses and Jewish law here. Jewish law states if she goes out with her hair flowing loose, so she doesn't cover her hair. If she spins in the marketplace, which basically is kind of like gossiping, if I remember correctly, or if she talks with just anybody. Abba Saul says if she curses his parents in his presence. And Rabbi Tarfon says, also, if she's a loudmouth. And what is a loudmouth? If she talks in her own house and her neighbors can hear her voice. So, ladies, if you're talking too loud and your neighbors can hear you, that's grounds for divorce. right? This is the sort of thing that they're dealing with. These men, because men were the only ones who were allowed to file for divorce in Jewish culture at the time, they were making up all these rules to basically just like make it so that if they just wanted to divorce their wife, they could get rid of her and keep the dowry. Again, we're coming back to this dowry issue. Now, here's the thing. Christianity has read this text without the context of the Jewish argument for so long, and they've said, see, only in matters of adultery can you divorce your wife. So if he's beating her within an inch of her life, then she can't divorce him. In fact, I had someone, they asked me to read this paper. They weren't quite sure on it. And it was like 100 pages. And so I kind of skimmed it. And I got to the end of it. And the end of it had like a bullet point list. They had studied out Matthew 19. They did their Hebrew word pictures. They did their Greek word pictures. They did the Paleo-Hebrew, the Paleo-Greek, all this stuff. They used their there were Strong's numbers everywhere in this paper, which as soon as I see strong numbers everywhere in a paper, I immediately go, oh, this person doesn't know Hebrew. I shouldn't have said that. That's mean. I'm sorry. Anyways, so I get done reading this, I skim and I get to this bullet point paper, and basically it says, the only reason for divorce is if the person had actually had premarital sex. They didn't even allow divorce for adultery, and then they had like this list of things that the husband could do that you couldn't get divorced for, which included, on this, I'm not joking, on this list was like bestiality, beating her, starving her, imprisoning her, committing incest, doing all, just like disgusting things on this list. And I just kind of turned to back to the person. I said, do you really want, to marry someone who may, do these things? Is this really what you think? If you read the whole of Scripture, rather than just proof texting, this is going to come up here really shortly. If you read the whole of Scripture, you get who God is. When you read Scripture, we're supposed to understand who our Father is, the character of Him, how He cares about people, how He loves them. He's not going to want you to stay married to someone who's doing all sorts of nasty things with Fido, and staying as mom, all this disgusting stuff. That's not what He wants. He also, do you really think about the character of God? Do you think the character of God says that even though this man is beating his wife every single day and she ends up with broken bones, miserable life, that she still can't divorce him? That God's going to hate her and love him because she finally had the guts to stand up and say no more? Come on. Common sense, understanding the character of our God, should dictate that's an absurd statement. That's an absurd belief, and yet that is the position that some branches of the church to this day even hold. I've talked to women whose children won't talk to them because they stood up to their husband finally and divorced him after being tortured for years and years and years. But they've been so brainwashed that the only way to get to heaven, the only way to be part of the resurrection, is to have the correct knowledge and get it all figured out and jump through the right loopholes. Can't divorce your abusive husband, but it's okay to abuse them, apparently. We've got to be realistic. We've got to look at the text. And this is exactly what Yeshua does. I love the statement he makes here. Have you not read? Right? These are people who spent like their entire lives reading. He's like, have you guys read the Bible? Seriously, have you not read that He who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Right? So rather than trying to, pull out his Strong's Concordance and his Paleo word chart and arguing over Deuteronomy 24, which is what they're asking about here. He says, haven't you read the Bible? God created them male and female, and for this reason a man should not leave, or should leave his mother and father and be joined to his wife and become one flesh. This is God's intent. We've got to look at the Bible not through this proof texting lens, but what is God's intent? What is God trying to do here? And they said, the proof text, right? Moses commanded giving her a certificate of divorce and sending her away. And Yeshua explains something that is not written in the text. It never says Moses permitted this, but Yeshua is explaining this to them. You guys are looking at scriptures wrong. It's not a black and white proof text Bible, right? The whole idea is not to live your life, to create these little, cutouts of this verse and say, oh, this applies to every single situation. It's to understand the whole picture, the big picture of what's going on. And when you look at the big picture, Moses is dealing with a bunch of infants. He's dealing with a bunch of people who are constantly doing things wrong. They're constantly doing things wrong. And so some of these commandments, and this becomes extremely important, some of the commandments in the Torah aren't God's actual will for our lives. Some of them are allowed. Let's look at this here, because this is a bold statement on my behalf, but I'm just following what Yeshua says here. He says, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it has not been this way. So that means that some things in Torah, even when they're not specified, are not actually commands, but they're allowances. So let's go through some of those. 2 wives. Oh, I'm allowed to have 2 wives. Why didn't God make Adam a second wife? Why didn't he do it? Look at the big picture. Look at the stories. Look at the stories. Look at every single person who has 2 wives. Right? Happy wife, happy life. Not happy wives, happy life. We see Abraham, miserable. Right? Jacob, more than miserable. Excuse me. All of these times, people have 2 wives or more, it doesn't go well. I mean, look at Solomon. Solomon had like 700 wives plus a bunch of concubines. How well did that go for him? Miserable. So just because it's permitted, maybe it's permitted because of the hardness of your heart, and maybe rather than trying to have these little cutouts of the Bible, oh, it lets me do this, so I can do this. Maybe we should look at God's intent for our lives. This doesn't allow us to, say, oh, well, then I can just do whatever I want, right? This isn't a license to just change the Bible how we want. This is a license to take the Bible seriously, to take it super seriously, but to realize that these laws were given to a people coming out of Egypt in a desert who were learning how to walk the right path. And sometimes those were more of like a fence protecting them from going too far, right? The whole idea of getting married wasn't so that you could divorce your wife, but because of how much it could be abused, God put a fence that, you know what, I know you guys, even if I tell you guys don't divorce your wife, you're going to find a way to do it, right? Humans are hard-hearted, right? We're stubborn people. And so he created this kind of fence. He's like, this is not what I wanted to do, but here's this allowance. And the rabbis, House of Hillel and House of Shammai, really the House of Hillel is at fault here, right? They had taken this, what was supposed to be a protective fence, and thought that this was the way to do things. And so they started creating all sorts of extra rules to just basically be able to divorce their wife for whatever reason, right? Oh, the Torah allows me to get rid of you because you burned my toast this morning. In reality, I'm sick of you, and there's this pretty young girl down the street, so I'm going to divorce you, and I'm going to go chase after her. The hardness of their heart. The hardness of their heart. So I would challenge you, next time you think about the commandments, next time you talk about people keeping the commandments, next time you try to study what commandments to keep in your life, think about Yeshua's way that he handles the commandments here. He doesn't jump in and argue about whether it was a matter of indecency or a matter or indecency. He doesn't even mention the text. We only know that this is the text because we know that this was an argument in the first century, and we get that little key word there that Matthew throws in about for any reason at all, right? Because, by the way, there was a whole nother set of divorce laws in Exodus 21, I believe it was. It's where it talks about if a man takes a servant wife and then he gets another wife, he can't diminish the servant wife's marital rights, her food, or her clothing, right? They all took that, the Essenes, the Sadducees, or I'm not sure about this. We don't know much about the Sadducees, but both houses of Shammai, or of the Pharisees, Hillel and Shammai, they all agreed that if you were abusive to your wife, i.e., diminish her food, clothing, sexual privileges, if you're abusive to your wife, that is legal grounds for divorce. Right? So they already had that. That wasn't an argument. They already understood the character of God would not desire a woman or a man in an abusive relationship to have to stay there. So they already had that provision figured out. That's not what they're arguing about here in Matthew 19. What they're arguing about is Deuteronomy 24 about divorcing your wife for any matter at all. And look at how Yeshua handles it. He goes back to Genesis. He goes back to the heart of the Creator. He goes and looks at the big picture. Says, is this really what God's intending for us to do? Is this really what it's all about, is divorcing your wives? Think about that. I'm not saying, there's so many things out there, and we tend to look at the Bible as if it's black and white, but in reality, there's so much gray in there that has to be solved by knowing who God is, by understanding the trajectory that God has set us on.
Try to decipher, the correct interpretation, because it's a pretty big subject. And so what I want to touch on is, we can see here from the very onset, when we read Matthew 19, what's the first thing that pops out at you when the Pharisees came to him? What's the first thing what did they try to do? What was on the hearts of the Pharisees when they asked Yeshua this question? What was their goal? What was their motive? It says it right there in verse 3. Tempt him. Okay, they're trying to tempt him. And so the question was, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Okay, now, a little bit of a backdrop here. There was a big debate then, as there is today, and I think it was even before then, on interpreting the scriptures concerning this topic. And so there was a dispute of interpretation over Deuteronomy 24 among the two groups of Pharisees. The house of Hillel, they took a very liberal view, and the house of Shammai, which took a very strict view. We have the same thing today. We have, views on both sides and everything in between, don't we? All right. In order to understand the debate that prompted the question, Ryan made a comment. We need to refer to some literature, some historical literature on the details of that debate, and he references the Mishnah. It's also, Josephus talks a little bit about it, and so he goes to Deuteronomy 24 and he goes through that, And so the argument was over defining what the matter of indecency, or as the King James Version would say, as uncleanness. What's the correct interpretation of that? And so to understand, their thinking and their theology, then you have to look at these other sources. And so Rabbi Shammai's interpretation of the matter of indecency was adultery or some sexually lewd act, and that was grounds for divorce. Rabbi Hillel, interpretation of the matter of indecency was in matter. Now let me repeat that. Rabbi Hillel's interpretation was a matter or indecency. So they grouped it into two categories, okay, which included what Shammai taught, but also included other matters, okay, lesser matters. So that was the debate then. And you wouldn't know that unless, you read some of the historical context. So understand that when the Bible gives you a story, there's things behind the scenes that we're not given. So we have to, and a lot of Paul's letters is this way. He's giving answers to the churches, and often we don't have the very questions that were given to Paul. So we have to kind of, what was the issue that prompted Paul to write this letter and make these statements? So we got something similar going on here. Is what was the debate then that the Pharisees are trying to tempt Yeshua to pick a side? And so the details of the debate are found in the Mishnah, Gittin 9:10, and the Kedopat 7:6. I may not be pronouncing these right. And so the house of Shammai said a man should divorce his wife only because he has found grounds for unchastity. Since it said because he has found in her indecency in anything. The house of Hillel says even if she spoiled the dish, or burnt the toast. Since it said because he has found in her indecency in anything. Rabbi Akiba says even if he found someone else prettier than she, he could divorce. Since it said, and it shall be if she find no favor in his eyes. So you can see the debate, the extent of the debate. And so interpretations for grounds for divorce on other matters, according to Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Akiba, included some very minor things. Other reasons are found in the Mishnah, Kedubot 7:6. If she feeds him food which hasn't been tithed. If she, if they come together when she's in her cycle, he could divorce her. If she does not cut off her dough offering, I'm not sure what a dough offering was. If she vows and does not carry out a vow. If she goes out with her hair flowing loose, blowing in the wind, so she couldn't ride a Harley Davidson today, or ride a horse very fast without tying her hair back. Or if she spins in the marketplace. Now, he said that meant like gossiping. I thought maybe she was dancing in the marketplace, You see how hard it is to interpret what's really going on? If she talks with just anybody. If she curses his parents in his presence. If she's a loudmouth. And what's a loudmouth? They did kind of interpret that. A loudmouth is if she talks in her own house and her neighbors can hear her voice. So a lot of debate was going on over this issue. And Christian interpretations vary also from a very liberal to very strict view. So the debate's not new. It's millennial old. And I would say this topic would be in the top 10 of causes for division in churches today. That's my opinion, okay. So the question is, how do we navigate these topics and come to a conclusion in our personal walk with Him? And so here are some things that I've learned in my almost 40 years of walking with God. Believe what you understand today and follow it, okay? In other words, just follow your convictions that you know today. But be willing to change when God reveals new truth. there's things I don't believe today that I believed 40 years ago. But when I believed it, and I followed it. And God honors that. Okay? He honors, if you're not going to be committed to what you believe to be true at the moment, why would He give you new truth if to be committed to if you're not going to be committed to what you know to be true today? Does that make sense? Seek biblical understanding from a Hebrew mindset. The language and the culture it was written in. We're very blessed to have the translations we have today, translated in almost every language out there. But understand that thought can get lost in translation. Your translation, people ask, what's the best translation? I don't know how anybody could answer that. It's because the translator, and I'm not diminishing their their role, but it's very difficult. What were they thinking? 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. What was the idea, the thought they're trying to convey? Because you're trying to convey that idea from their language into yours. And so how do we help get a better understanding? By understanding it from a Hebrew cultural mindset.
Mike.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I'd like to respond to part
Yeah.
of it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, put it close to your mouth, though.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I certainly agree with the conviction aspect. I think that's a very important point. From my experience, painful experience, there is another element, I think, and I'm not sure quite where to put it, but I might actually put it above the one of conviction, and that's humility. Because, yes, God does bless our convictions that are held, but He also does not bless them. I've seen a lot of devastation within fellowships because people who strongly held, faithfully held with their convictions to the detriment of others, of people. And so if those convictions are held without a corresponding humility, and as you pointed out, some of your deeply held convictions, as with some of my deeply held convictions, I no longer hold. Mm-hmm. So part of that humility is, I think, is a recognition of our place. We are here for lifelong learning. So God is teaching us lifelong. And it's tricky because we're making our way through this and we're trusting in Him and we have some knowledge, but we don't have all knowledge. And the knowledge that we do have, we need to have enough humility to recognize that we don't have all the answers. Now, I'm going to skate on thin ice here, okay, a little bit, because just as an illustration for myself, for many years, and even still to this day, one of my strongest held convictions is that God is pro-life, all right? Yeah. And that abortion is deadly wrong. And in fact, in all circumstances. And so I still hold to that conviction. Now, the reason I'm saying this skates on thin ice is because that also affects politics, and we have to apply it, right? We have to apply this. So consequently, what I have done over the years, I mean decades, is I have viewed the less conservative party that does not hold to pro-life. So I'm not actually mentioning that. I'm skating around it there. But what I'm saying is I've held that party as an evil party. And consequently, anyone associated with that party, in my mind, is contaminated with that evil. Because that one single issue is so important to me that it doesn't matter what other good they do. And that's where the danger comes in. Because I acknowledge that I have missed out how God has moved in the lives of others, because they didn't hold to that central conviction of mine. That God uses me, he can use them too. And so, isn't that what happened here with the Pharisees? They had some deeply held convictions, and they missed out. They missed out on the arrival of God in the flesh, in their presence, the thing that they longed for and wanted, and they missed it completely. So there's where the humility, I think, needs to come into play, because especially now, God is moving in the whole world. We know that he's moving. Not sure what he's going to do, but we know he's in charge and that he's accomplishing his purposes. And the thing is, they may not align with what we expect God to do. And the question, like Abraham Lincoln, is not whether God is on our side, but whether we are on God's side. And to arrive at that perspective, we need a great deal of humility. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's what Yeshua touched on in chapter 18 before he gets into this subject, is he that is greatest, shall humble himself as a little child. I'm reminded, as you were telling that giving those analogies, of the Apostle Paul. He was before he was converted on the road to Damascus, about who Yeshua really was, he was very adamant, and he fought, and he killed, the apostles, some of the apostles, where he was part of stoning, Stephen, and but he held to that conviction, and God knew that he would fight, what he would do to fight for what he believed. And so all he had to do was, convince Paul, humble Paul. He got humbled, did he not? Yeah. And he became a warrior for Christ. Third item on the list is understand that Yeshua came to uphold and live the Torah, not change it. This was transformational for me in my walk, because in order to have, be sound in your faith and your walk, you have to have some kind of foundation you're standing on. And Yeshua always referred back to the Torah when he was asked questions. He says, well, what's written in the law of Moses? And I just want to remind you of Matthew 5:17-18. Most of you know it. Think not that I come to destroy the law or the Torah or the prophets. I come not to destroy, but to fulfill, or to honor. When it says fulfill the royal law in James, the book of James, what did it mean by fulfilling the royal law? It's honoring and doing them. So understand that he didn't come to change that. So how do we interpret his words? We have to go back to the Torah and understand what was written in the beginning, okay? Number 4, look for thematic connections and patterns as witness to interpretation of Scripture. So what does that mean? We can see patterns, in the Bible, beginning with Genesis. And those patterns, And thematic connections help us, solidify if we're interpreting Scripture right. Because, God says, I do not change, okay? And, this yearly cycle and the yearly feast and the weekly Sabbath, he keeps repeating the same thing over and over because we're kind of like, like oxen in some ways. Oxen, to train oxen, they would attach them to like this what do you call it? Well, a grist mill would be an example, but you have a center post, and you'd have these posts going out, and you would tie them, you'd yoke them to this, and all they could do is walk in a circle, okay? They get so used to walking a circle, it creates a path, okay? And so it's a pattern. God is cyclical, and he teaches us in patterns, and because we need to be constantly reminded. So thematic connections and patterns help us properly interpret Scripture. And understand the Bible, the instructions is all about principles, okay? We have to be careful taking black and white and becoming dogmatic on a ruling, okay? And the Bible is about principle, okay? That's why when they ask Yeshua, can a man is it lawful to divorce his wife for any cause? For any cause. He didn't even answer that question like they wanted. He doesn't side with Shammai, he doesn't side with Hillel. What does he do? He goes back to the beginning. What was the purpose of marriage? Okay? The purpose of marriage wasn't to make the man happy in every area of life, getting a perfect meal every time, getting, the prettiest girl out there. That wasn't the purpose for marriage. Marriage was for what? Procreating, to advance the kingdom and to bring, as many as we can. And that's the purpose of marriage, okay? He took them back to the purpose, okay? And they were trying to redefine the purpose for marriage in terms of happiness. What makes me happy? So they were putting their wives away to satisfy their purpose of making them happy. That wasn't the purpose. So God takes them back to the purpose, okay? And so look for thematic connections and patterns. 5, understand that not all instructions in the Torah are commands. Many instructions are allowances, okay? Many are allowances. He gave the example of a man could have more than one wife, okay? Those were allowances. Well, and so they weren't commands. Another example is in judicial punishment. When somebody committed a crime, there were maximum penalties for crimes. It wasn't a command that they had to execute the maximum sentence, in every case. Point in case. King David. Did they stone Bathsheba? Did they stone David? Some say, well, if they would have committed this, they would have been stoned. No, that was the maximum penalty, okay? So all commands in the Bible, or all instructions are not commands, and all, and all allowances are not commands. There's allowances and they're commands because it's supporting principles, okay? And understand that the term, the law of Moses, is the law of Yahweh given to Moses. And I got some scripture here I wish I would have put in the handout. But, this idea that the law of Moses, it was his instruction, he's the one that gave the allowance for divorce. It wasn't Yahweh. That's a false premise, and it can't be supported. If you look at the text in the scriptures. Exodus 24:12. It says, and Yahweh said, these aren't in your handout if you want to jot them down. Exodus 24:12. And Yahweh said unto Moses, come up to me in the mount and be there, and I will give you tables of stone and a law or Torah and commandments which I have written. Who? Yahweh. That I may teach them. Joshua 23:6. Be therefore very courageous to keep and do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, that ye turn not aside therein to the right or left. So here it mentions the book of the law of Moses. 2 Chronicles 34:14. And when they brought out the money that was brought into the house of Yahweh, Hilkiah the priest found a book of the law of Yahweh given by Moses. Okay, so I want you when every place the term the law of Moses is there, the correct understanding and interpretation of that, it's the law of Yahweh written in the book of Moses. Because Yahweh says in Exodus that Yahweh gave Moses tables of stone, a law and commandments which I have written. Okay? Yahweh wrote those and gave them to Moses, and Moses, I don't know his part, maybe he had, he wrote it down too, I don't know, but Moses the one that put it in a book and gave it to the people and taught the people. It's Yahweh's law written in the book of Moses, okay? It's not Moses' law. I mean, he wasn't the author, the original author. He was you might say, the scribe. And then 1 Kings 2:3, and keep the charge of Yahweh thy God, to walk in his ways, keep his statutes and commandments and his judgments and his testimonies, as is written in the law of Moses. Okay? And Nehemiah 8:14, and they found written in the law which Yahweh had commanded by Moses. Nehemiah 10:29, they clave to their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and into an oath to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of Yahweh, our Lord, and his judgment statutes. So the term, the law of Moses, it's the law of Yahweh written in the book of Moses. Moses was just the scribe, okay? And he's the one that taught the people. But the original author was Yahweh. And I would say that this Yahweh was Yeshua that handed that law to Moses or gave it to Moses on the mount. Because Yeshua said that Yeshua always referred the people back to the Torah. And Yeshua also said, he that hears my words and keeps them will be like one who builds his house upon the rock. Okay? He that keeps my sayings. So the law of Moses was actually the law that Yeshua gave Moses on the mount. That's how I understand it. Okay? So we're out of time. Any comments or questions? I know we covered a big topic in a short time, but again, the goal wasn't to try to make a determination on the rulings of this. It was to help us how to better interpret and understand Scripture and provide some foundational premises as we do that. Okay? Any comments or questions? You have a quiet today. Okay. We'll take a break, and when you hear the shofar, we'll come back for the next service. Thank you.